You haven't gone live yet, right? Nancy is saying there's no sound.
There wasn't any sound because I was muted, but there should be sound now. Does anybody else need a copy of?
Come on over here and we'll look at it together.
I have extras.
We the sound on YouTube. So.
Be the same.
Because you're just streaming YouTube.
Yeah. I had us muted earlier so that it wasn't broadcasting because we were,
Right.
10 minutes before the meeting.
He's in set that, that's why he's here.
Yeah.
But I don't want to hear anymore. What this guy. This comes in here. And you want to through the trees. Together. So this.
Yeah.
Yeah, this. The second. Yes.
How is that? Busy?
Just doesn't sit a thing about, oh, because he's trying to stay
Got to go to
close to the edges.
Old Barrel.
That's what I see. Well, yeah, I'm gonna try and not be out in the middle of. Right. So
I'll say do that.
and that was probably older than that.
So maybe I should disconnect this. You don't have to kids. And the sisters. You don't.
to all of the paper stuff and I connected.
Right.
Yeah.
We moved around some, the first time. So the states moved out kids.
I guess from here.
How polar it is. It's hard. If you move with kids, you have to be factual. And move on. That's cool, but the parents, yeah, you get it.
Ready?
1 minute. You know, 'cause, yeah, sometimes they line up,
You move
sometimes they
with
don't.
kids and you're done.
My clock says 5:30. Your clock says 5:20.
They're both
By
by
both by
voting.
voting.
You'd like to open the meeting?
Yes. Okay, this is the meeting of the Harbor Springs Zoning Board of Appeals. And will you call the roll?
I sure will. Tim Morris,
Here.
Michael Behrman,
Here.
Sue Stewart,
Here.
John Leo,
Here.
Bob Thoma,
Here.
Bob Buckner. Here. We have a quorum and we have one extra, so we should be good.
We have an approval of the minutes from January 10th, anybody?
I
Any
move that we
comments?
approve the minutes.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye, approved. Okay, so we have time for public comment. Anybody who would like to speak about anything? Feel free, one at a time, 3 minutes.
This would be anything not on the agenda.
Right. Nobody? Nothing? Okay, we're moving right along. Be time to have a Valentine's Day drink pretty quick. Maybe even a piece of chocolate. Okay, new and old business. You don't have any old business? I don't think, nothing? Yeah,
No, I don't believe so.
okay, so this is the new business, the variance request for 2 Beach Drive for a dock. You wanna elaborate?
Yep, should we have a motion to open the
Oh,
public
yes,
hearing and
please.
start with that?
Yeah, motion to open,
I move that we open the public meeting.
okay, second, John, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving along.
Let me. I apologize, let me pull up the plan on the city of Harbor Springs. So, sure. Everybody?
One of those Hershey kisses are waiting.
No pressure.
Sorry for the delay. Here it is. So what I would like to point out here, if I could steal back the laser pointer for a second. So this is 2 Beach Drive. I think we're all familiar with that location right down there. The important thing I want to point out is 2 things. One, we're looking at a variance request for this dock section here on the property. The important thing to note is the high water mark here. Anything that's out on this side of that, that's not really something that's within the city of Harbor Springs. That's on Lake Michigan. And the applicants will have to go to the Army Corps of Engineers or the DNR to get whatever permissions they need for that. So that's really something that we don't have to include in our discussion tonight. What we're going to be discussing is the request for the dock section here. This is the buildable area for any type of structure, which this would be technically part of the front yard. And we can see that the section here is within the side yard setback and then into the front yard setback here. I really don't think that we have anything in our zoning code to address this type of request. Normally with properties, they don't need that section to get to the lake. So the zoning code really hasn't addressed a situation like this. That's the only thing I want to add. Other than that, I'll hand it over to the applicants here and they can express their reasons for why they would like to do this. Got a little.
Give us a sec for our tech to take up here.
It's okay, we're used to it.
Should be able to steal it, yeah.
While Keegan's getting that up. Thank you for your time. My name's John Evans, a partner at Hairshot Landscape Architects representing Mr. Burrow. Again, thank you for your time and consideration of our variance request.
It's blue. You should be able to push the button on the top.
There you go. There it is. Okay, provide a little bit of context for the space first. This is obviously August 2014, just an aerial shot that sort of shows the vegetation that typically covers the pond throughout the growing season. Again, just to provide a little bit of context. So we'll show in just a moment here, but the property line is roughly in this area and this area on this side. So this is 1 Beach Drive, 2 and 3, right around where this hedge currently is. Again, some more context. This is much more recent. This is May 2023, so almost a year ago now. Been a few changes to the space. There's a hedge section here that was removed, but another hedge section that remains out along Beach Drive on 3 Beach Drive properties, okay? This is, property lines are roughly here and here. We'll show that in the next slide. So this is the proposed approach that we've overlaid on top of the aerial shot that we just provided. Also to note here, view A, B, and C that we've provided sketches of that I'll show here with a little bit more detail in a few moments. We provided those because we want part of this is a visual, there's a visual aspect of this. We want to make sure that everyone understands what the visual aspect to this open water in the lagoon is, or the duck pond, I think, as I've heard it referred to, the local vernacular. We've noted the setbacks, as Jeff mentioned a few minutes ago. We've been referring to this as a boardwalk as a separate component from the actual dock itself. So I'm going to refer to the item in question as boardwalk, if that's okay, moving forward. This is the document that Jeff showed earlier that shows what we provided to the city of Harbor Springs and that all of you have had access to. This is a section elevation of the boardwalk on the left here. Then a section elevation of the dock on the right, which is outside the property line out over the open water. And again, this is Beach Drive on the left. This shows a lawn ramping down to the boardwalk that continues out over the open water to a transition point out to the dock on the lakeside. So the ask is for this boardwalk to be considered and permitted, even though it's outside the setback. We have a unique situation here, obviously, where this body of water precludes our client from accessing his dock out on the lake. He is unfortunately, of the 67 homes out there, 66 have access via land to their dock. He is the only property out there that doesn't. So that is the ask, and that's the specific hardship that we feel like we're facing, is not being able to access the dock because of this open water. Also to note real quickly that the Army Corps has signed off on the dock out in the lake, and the boardwalk has also been signed off on by Eagle. So those steps have already been taken.
So you already have those approvals?
Yes, sir, we do.
And that's with the current design, correct?
The only change to it, and actually I'm going to mention that now, I'm glad you brought that up. From a design perspective, the only difference between what is proposed here and what is shown in the Army Corps document, or excuse me, the Eagle document that was signed off on, we actually shifted the boardwalk to the east or up as viewed here to pull it out of the open watershed from a visual perspective. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that was a mistake. We actually therefore pulled a greater square footage of the boardwalk out of the allowable building space. So there's a larger square foot that's outside the building space that we're asking for. But we tried to think about this pragmatically and thinking about aesthetics and design and that view shed that the community is faced with. So we did shift that up. So that is the only change that we've made from the
Would that,
boardwalk design that was approved by.
would not that require though, a new approval though?
We would potentially have to review that with Eagle. As a shift of probably 10 feet roughly. Same materials, same components, same structure,
Yeah.
but sure.
So, and this, I mean, it was interesting that one of the pictures you used for examples of the decking is the Little Traverse Conservancy boardwalk that goes through the swamp at the other end of town.
Yep.
And that permitting consideration must have been roughly the same as this one in terms of looking at boardwalk. I mean, I think it's interesting, boardwalks through wetlands are pretty common now, and it's not that hard to get Eagle to say yes to a boardwalk through a wetland. It's not considered destructive to put a boardwalk through.
Okay, couple of things I want to touch base on, and we're going out of order here, but I'm perfectly fine with that as long as everybody else is. The structure that's proposed is not, it is a permanent adjustable dock. So in other words, we are not dropping helicals into the ground plane. These are floating pads that would sit on the surface of the bottom of the lagoon. It is proposed to be permanent, even though it is an adjustable seasonal dock. We would like to leave this thing in place, okay? Now, I'm gonna go ahead and touch upon the materiality aspect of this, and that's why we showed those photos. I say this very honestly, we've been fortunate enough to work in Harbor Springs for almost 20 years now. We finished our first project probably about 19 years ago. And I never thought we'd be back. What an interesting, fun, quaint little community it was, but we continue to be able to work here, love this community, and local vernacular is important to me. And the materiality, the reason we showed that is it was important to us and Brian that we picked up off of local vernacular. So we were proposing a hardwood dock instead of or boardwalk instead of an artificial surface that crosses the lagoon. I think that is important. That's local vernacular, local aesthetic, and that's why we included those photos in there.
So the material will be hardwood.
It will be real wood, okay? What we're actually proposing, and we can all, remind me to touch base on that, the specifics of the material. It's likely going to be Kebony, which is an acetylated pine, a sustainably produced pine that is effectively pressure treated with vinegar. And it has about a 30-year shelf life. So it ages and looks just like wood. The last project we did with it was in far northwest Iowa, about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's held up really well. There were probably about 6,000 or 8,000 square foot there.
The ones in the swamp down
Yeah,
there? A less durable material than this, something that doesn't weather as well as this. I'm sure it's a plain, straightforward pine or hardwood or something.
So again, a few more context photos. This is street view from 2019. Obviously, probably pretty close to the high water mark. Glad those days are gone for now and that things have receded a little bit. This is one of the photos that we've sketched over top of to provide the view. This is one from right near the intersection of lot 1 and 2 and Beach Drive. Another photo we took this past fall, when we first took a look at this with Brian. Lake levels have obviously receded, but this provides some context and understanding. You can pop back one, would you? Where understanding what the vegetation surrounding the space looks like in summer and how it sort of conceals certain views from the roadside. These are just, no, that's fine, go ahead. These are just some sketches that we've provided from these different unique vantage points. The dock is over here on the left. We've proposed the dock elevation be 3 inches above high water mark. So we're trying to keep this thing relatively speaking as low as possible, but we've our understanding of current high water mark. So the lower this thing is, the lower the profile is. And again, the further we shift this to the east, there's a significant amount of existing vegetation over there, both native grasses and cattails, that we really feel like are going to envelop this thing to a significant extent so that the thing is concealed, so that it isn't a visual issue. The other alternative is to have pushed it out within, at least partially, falling within the buildable parameters, but it just seemed like it made more sense to push as far east as possible, as long as we were at it. Yes.
Is there a reason you haven't pushed it? I mean, you're 5 feet. Is there a reason you haven't gobbled up 2 of those 5 and kept it moving to the east?
I don't know. I grew up on a farm and we had good fences make good neighbors. We always just try to respect property lines and boundaries. So we thought it would be thoughtful and respectful to at least stay 5 feet off the neighbor's property line. But we would certainly be open to that as well. Not a problem at all. That'd be perfectly fine.
And does the fence runs the length of lots 1 and 2, is that right? And where it ends is the beginning of 3?
Yes, currently.
Yeah, okay. So that's another reason not to push it farther east, just in terms of appearance, to keep it inside that.
It abuts the neighbor's hedge that runs along the beach there.
Have you had any conversations with the property owners on lot 3 and what their opinion is about this?
I'm gonna defer.
Yeah, lot 3 is, are the Shays, Jenny and Tom, we did their house for them. She has this package. I asked her if she could respond to her in her response, and I had a text, if y'all like to see, is that she's at the hospital. Her mom's battling cancer. She was, I just can't get to it right now. And Tom was in Europe. I couldn't get a hold of him, but we discussed it with them and they didn't, again, they told me they didn't have a problem, but that's the best I could do with them right now.
We got a few more sketches. This is from across the road, more like the center of lot 2, on the lagoon side of the street. Again, a lot of that existing vegetation that we've just sketched over top of it. This is the view we had from this fall when we were here, when the deciduous plant material was dormant, but there is a significant amount of vegetation surrounding this thing, and it will obscure a lot of these views. And again, our goal is to push this thing as far to the east as we would be allowed, and try to focus on natural wood and that local vernacular to make this thing sort of reseed and all within the thoughtfully within the context. Another view, this is from lot 1 along the edge of Beach Drive. Again, this is arguably one of the greater views of the boardwalk. Again, we've tried to thin the profile up as much as possible. It's probably going to end up around 8 inches. And we do have a letter of support from the owner of lot 1.
Robin Julie
Sears. So we did reach out to them, knowing also that they had from their vantage point, would have a significant view of this. Again, this is getting back to materiality, local vernacular, and just making sure that this fits the area and it is befitting of Harbor Springs, and not only meets our clients' expectations from a functional perspective, but isn't intrusive. Again, this sort of gets a feeling of what the appearance of this would be. This is a hardwood deck here that we actually did north of town several years ago, adjacent to the water. The specific material, again, that we're talking about here is Kevany. It's a pretty interesting product. It started, I think, in maybe Belgium. Over in Europe, they started producing this probably 30 or 40 years ago. They seem to be ahead of us in certain sustainable technology. I'm sort of a late embracer of this. I don't always trust that these things are going to work out very well. We've tried them in limited amounts. It's worked great. It's dimensionally more stable than mahogany, and it has greater rot resistance than Western red cedar, which is often used. So it's effectively just as good as any other treated product out in the market. But the sustainable aspect of it is impregnated via pressure with an acid that is almost identical to vinegar. So it's pressure treated with that. It holds up incredibly well, and it's sustainably produced. Pine is the actual wood species that's used. Radiata pine, I think. So that, I think, ends the presentation or our thoughts from our end for now. Open to any questions, I guess, that anyone has.
Comments, questions from the board?
Anybody?
I have a question for Jeff.
Please.
Looking at this, if we grant this variance, then lot 1's going to be in the same circumstances.
Maybe, maybe not. Lot 1 does have, and if we go to, steal screen back.
They have a little strip of land.
They have a little
It's still
strip.
going to be,
He's gonna go up here.
yeah,
Yeah. So,
but it's close to the setback or within the setback probably.
maybe, but at the same time though, in looking at the aerial here, they have a strip of land here at the bottom.
Uh-huh.
So they could do some light landscaping potentially to walk along that, not needing to put in any type of structure, which would then give them access to their dock.
Okay.
Similarly with lot 3, they have some land up here that they can do some landscaping similar to the other neighbors north of them. So truly, I think that as they mentioned,
It really is a one.
it's kind of a one-off thing.
Thanks.
They may have to do a little bit of finagling to make something work on the top or bottom here, but they potentially have a path. So I think the argument for practical difficulty would be much more hard for them to make regarding this, because they have some potential alternatives.
So we're
Whereas,
potentially just going to have one boardwalk across there.
right,
They still will be outside of the setbacks. It would seem, site 1, even on the small strip there, It looks like, I'm assuming they'd be outside of their side setbacks.
We'll have to have the same meeting.
So we would have to
If
grant
they-
the variance.
Well,
Yeah.
If they wanted to
That
build,
would-
but he's saying they don't even have to build.
right, it would just be.
That's
true. There.
Because the
Yeah,
key
that's
there, the key
Right,
there in that
they-
situation
yeah.
is,
You're right,
yeah, the key in that situation is,
they wouldn't,
a variance would only be necessary if they wanted to build a structure. If it's landscaping, then they should be okay.
yep,
They build a structure.
We do have some people in the audience and we have some people online, so do we want to see if anybody has any?
Folks have anything that you'd like to comment on or ask or tell us? Nothing? This is a Valentine's Day date?
It's the-
Different idea, Valentine's Day. I was really focused on Valentine's.
I don't know whether to be humbled or shocked.
For those of you online, there is an icon you can push to raise your hand if you'd like to offer any comments. And so far, I don't see anything.
Okay. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Any comments from you guys? Nothing, anything?
No, it was a very comprehensive.
Pretty much.
It was a
I
good
guess my
presentation.
only comment would be, it seems, even though it's probably a foregone conclusion that Eagle does need to approve the revised plan, even though it's essentially the same boardwalk, just moved to the east. Would that preclude us from taking action tonight, I guess, is my question. It's more of a question. Maybe that's something Jeff could answer.
Well, I would think if if at the end of the
Pending-
discussion, we
pending approval.
say it would have to be conditional
Yeah.
on an updated approval on both of those, yeah.
That would certainly be an appropriate condition to
Okay.
include.
'Cause you never know.
Okay,
This to me looks very much like a fence along the side of a property. I mean, it's a little different because it's a wetland and it's a wetland that people know as a wetland and they like it that way, but I honestly don't see it being. You know, when we first started talking about this project, the idea of the bridge over or something like that seemed like a big change, and I don't think this will be. I think it's fine.
I think a significant effort has gone into minimizing.
Yeah.
Both the physical and the visual
Yeah.
effect that this has. And it is their property. I mean, they're entitled to do it.
You know, and like North Country Trail goes through a lot of areas that are wetlands, and there are miles and miles and miles of boardwalk just like this through those areas that the Park Service owns, the Forest Service owns, private property owners. It's becoming a very common thing to put boardwalks like this through so that people can access wetlands, and it's a nice way to make the wetland usable without ruining the wetland. And I think that's a good thing.
And it doesn't dramatically change the level of activity in that area. I mean, you've got the dog beach on one side, you've got other, marine craft on the other side. So it's not a dramatic change in use.
And anyone who tries to come on this property has to deal with the red-winged blackbirds. Good luck.
Was there any consideration to giving the boardwalk a little curve feel, sort of to mimic the curvature of the, I don't know, aesthetics, or maybe this just aesthetically looks better, that's great.
It sort of seemed to us like we were paralleling the property line, just sort of a shortest distance between 2 points. Really try to minimize the whole impact of it as much as possible.
no handrails?
again, we tried to minimize the impact as much as possible.
I appreciate the effort to try to put it in the vegetation that'll further, hide it.
Yeah, John, I agree, John. I mean, my initial heartburn was why not make it within the setback, but I think by far the lesser evil is pushing it further east.
When you're down there and
Oh, yeah.
you look at it,
Yeah.
it doesn't cut through much of the
Right,
building.
Well, and to me, the intent of a setback in construction is to keep things separate,
right.
but there's nothing next to it and there's already a hedge, so they're taking advantage of
Yeah.
the current layout.
Right.
And I think a lot of the objections that I've heard are regarding the visual, going across her last pristine, what?
Yeah, yeah.
This addresses a lot of that.
Yeah, it does.
I have one question.
Yes,
How
please.
wide is this boardwalk?
Could we get your name and address for the
Yes,
record, please?
Thatcher Waller, 2625 Pennsylvania.
Thank you very much.
It's 5 feet, isn't it?
6 feet.
6 feet, I'm
6
sorry.
feet wide? 6 feet.
I'm good.
Okay. I would like them to see that the vegetation that's left in the setback not be. I mean, it's a completely different issue, but the guy next door has clear cut to every twig out there. Is that your intention?
To leave the vegetation?
Yes.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, counting on it.
Yeah. Yeah, again, our whole goal is that this is as low impact as possible, I mean, there's a moment where you can say, can we make this beautiful and more attractive and add things to it? And there's a time and a place for that, but in this instance, as minimal impact as possible aesthetically and practically to the vegetation, all the above. It's just, we're trying to make it as simple as we can.
That's a good point, Bob. Is that something that we can make conditional?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I would like to I don't know how to do this. I'd like to make it conditional on that there's no removal of vegetation or cutting in this strip. Yes? No?
I think maybe the better way to handle that would be to have a condition that would require them to maintain vegetation of at least a certain height as kind of a view barrier between the two properties there. That would be something that we would want to make sure that the property owner is comfortable accepting that condition. Because that would be something that would run with the land as long as that.
We're cutting them down faster than they're growing.
Yeah, but if you feel that that's an important thing to make sure that it minimizes the impact on neighboring properties, the view of that dock. Not sure if view barrier is the proper term.
Well, the
For
neighboring
that.
property is why I'm bringing this up.
Can you go to the sketch that actually shows the boardwalk so we can be clear on what area we're talking about?
Yes. You're talking about this sketch here? I apologize that it's turned. Let's see if I can't fix that.
Isn't there aerial?
Yeah. Yeah, there is.
So it sounds like what you're talking about would be something on the north side of the picture or the east side of the dock to have some type of
Yes.
vegetation
wanted
requirement
to be
along
sure
that
we were-
property
He's
line.
back 5 feet. There's vegetation. Let's leave it there.
I think the key to, if you wanted to have something like that, would be to require that some level of vegetation be maintained at least of a certain height along that property line. To
Well, that's the
provide
issue.
for,
As soon as something 6 feet tall grows, they'll put it down.
well, but yeah, I think because the property owner isn't here today, right? I think that's something that we certainly would want to make sure that the property owner is comfortable with. We
Do
can't,
you represent the property owner? No?
Yeah,
yes,
Can you make that, can you make that decision?
that we will. My own opinions on that, I'm just thinking practically speaking, if they're walking along there and we end up with something like wild willow growing onto the lane over the boardwalk and there's an access issue or something like.
Okay, yeah, I get that.
But no, there's no desire to have less vegetation. None. We can definitely maintain vegetation within our property line. I mean, beyond.
Yeah,
that,
and I think we need to note that the property line, unless, you know, for, aquatic plants, you know, the shore of the east portion, is actually on the, neighbor's
Mhm,
property.
right.
It would be, there's probably some aquatic vegetation growing up within the property lines. Then on the northeast corner, there's probably some vegetation, but there's not a lot of shoreline, if you will, on the eastern portion that abates the water that's within their property. I would have to believe, you know, that I hope they wouldn't, you know, pull out aquatic plants from,
But our client has no desire to do that.
you know,
I mean, we're trying to minimize our touch on this thing as much as possible.
I think the desire is just to make sure that going forward, once it's in, that is in fact, we can hold the property owner to that, should it, you know, people tend to change their minds. I think that's the concern, maybe.
Yeah, my concern is that we're cutting them down.
It's all in how you
faster than
word
they
it.
can grow. We've been on a binge of cutting up on the bluff. That's what makes me bring this up. We're trying to figure out a way to put the brakes on some of this. So anyway.
Yeah, well, you have two ways that you could go about it. You could politely ask them, which doesn't really give us any authority. Or if you feel that it's really important, what we could do is if you were looking at proposing to accept the variance request, you could do it with two conditions. We had the one condition, what was the first one? With the
Yeah.
Eagle approvals.
With any
And then-
approval,
And then the second one would be conditional upon some type of signed agreement that they would maintain vegetation on their property, the east side of the shore of at least, let's say, 42 inches in height or something.
Yeah.
That would give them the ability to maintain and do what they want, but still, if you felt that we needed to go that far.
Thank you.
You're not
But that's,
looking at letting them grow big trees, you're just looking at keeping it, wanting them to
And if that
maintain.
should happen, well. That's,
I just,
You know, it's
I
hard
mean,
to,
we've been looking at pictures from when there was trees and vegetation on the lot next to it. Now it's clear cut. It's a sand pit. Everything bigger than 6 inches is gone.
I'd just want to point out two things. One, we can't force a condition on the property owner unless they're willing to accept it. They
Understand.
could say no. The second one is we really don't have any zoning regulations regarding vegetation for any other properties. So I just want to make sure that, you know, we're not overstepping.
could we encourage the property owner and the builder to take a look at the best management practices for shoreline properties that it's part of the new zoning code? Probably doesn't technically apply yet, and it's recommendations from the tip of the Mitt Watershed Council on how to keep, and I mean, this is a great example where if you went in and took out that peninsula and used riprap there instead and dredged inside it, that's not best practices. Leaving it vegetated and soft the way it is great. That's what people should be doing. And putting a boardwalk through it doesn't change any of that, but you know, the problem I see with talking to them about what vegetation has to be there or shouldn't be there is that this is the shoreline changes so much as a function of the lake. As soon as we say those trees have to be there, then we'll get high water and they'll die because of the water level. And that's just the nature of the vegetation that does well there, so.
I really like the idea of tying it to something that's been worked on for the last year, and then there's something concrete that then applies to everybody.
Yeah, that best
So-
management practices for shoreline properties thing.
And it could be conditional on an agreement being developed with the property owner, like you said.
If we just want to encourage.
We do.
And not have it as a condition and just include it as part of our language. We could do that. That doesn't force any requirement.
I'm fine with forcing a requirement. It's just how do you word it? So without the property owner being here and an opportunity to talk to them. And if we reference best practices, hard to argue against the best practices. I'm not against having it be a requirement,
What would the requirement be?
that they maintain the property according to best practices as outlined. It's like anything else. It has to be enforceable.
Right,
And they should have all of the freedom that they should have to plant what they want to plant. But if it's neglected or it changes, it would have to be replaced.
I think, what are we referencing though in terms of best practices? Is there, I
that's
mean,
the thing, what I was talking about is the new zoning code and the way it's done there as an overlay. And I asked a lot of questions when I don't remember whose presentation I went to somewhere along the way about the new zoning code, but exactly what does it mean to have an overlay and what does it mean and what does it mean? And what I got back was, it's a recommendation. So I think what I would want to see is that this be treated the same way that the new zoning code would treat it.
right, and I think that actually was in a joint meeting that we
Yeah,
had
that
with
we
the
had with the
planning
planning
commission.
commission, yeah.
Because I remember,
That I was being persistent.
yes, you were.
Gentlemen, I apologize to you that this is
No, it's an
happening.
important
But
topic.
you've kind of walked into a festering wound, that you didn't know about. I'm sorry.
I guess one comment, I don't know the answer to this, but Eagle does approve working through the wetlands. Are there stipulations within those approvals too?
I don't know. Good
I don't know
question.
the answer, but
Yeah, I don't either.
And I'm assuming that has to do probably with construction of the,
protection too, I would have.
yeah, but
Yeah, silt
protective-
protection and stuff.
measures taken during the construction process, I would imagine.
Eagle does have certain parameters limiting activities, construction or otherwise, within wetlands. They do have criteria. I can't cite them. But they do have limitations and criteria for management disturbance.
And honestly, the bigger concern I would have with this area is that once you disturb it, getting invasives in there, there's so much like on Pennsylvania down here, on the north side of Pennsylvania, it's a nightmare. And keeping native cattails instead of those invasive ones, and I don't know, yeah, just keeping an eye on stuff like that, but it
No
sounds like
purple
you're
stripe or whatever. So,
purple loosestrife, yeah,
For sure.
yeah.
So even within the proposed planning code, it's a recommendation.
That's my understanding after having asked several times, yeah.
So hard requirement to follow a recommendations.
Yeah, and I asked what the purpose was, and they said to raise awareness, to get people to pay attention to how things should be done. And
Okay, let's firm this up.
Okay, this was good though, it was helpful.
Yeah, yeah. So. We vote to approve or not based on a strong recommendation that no defoliation occurs. We're watching, I don't know how to phrase this. Sorry.
It's tricky.
well, I think,
Eagle.
the wetlands,
Yes.
that the wetlands are protected by Eagle regulations and
This is the last one. We want to do this right. This is the only lot we'll get.
Well, wouldn't you say that you vote to approve it in the context of they're getting approval from Eagle and the state and all corresponding protections that are implicit in that approval? Protections regarding vegetation and best practices for construction of the boardwalk and so on. And I think that does cover it.
Okay,
So how do you want to phrase your motion? We have the one condition that they,
Subject to approval by all governing agencies. If you want to list them, you can. And
And tag along vegetation requirements and best practices, construction. That sort of thing.
Recommend that they work according to the best practices for waterfront properties as outlined in the new zoning code, something like that.
It's good.
strong recommendation that no default, that no removal of. Put that in, strong recommendation.
so did we have a motion? Sounds like somebody's come up with a motion to approve the variance request, that they meet the requirements of practical difficulty and with the condition that they, prior to zoning approval, give us their approvals from Eagle. And with a strong recommendation that they comply with the vegetation requirements of the new zoning code. Did I hear somebody?
I would make that motion.
I'm sorry if I'm leading.
Right now, quick.
Is that what we?
What did he say?
Starting to get
We
better.
have that recorded, so it's okay.
Yeah, I can go back and listen to it,
But
but
that sounded good to me, so.
does that sound like what you were trying to get to?
Yeah,
All right.
you know where we're trying to go.
So
So
I
I
would
have a motion from.
I would second that.
All right, and we have a second. And I'll do a roll call on this one.
Please,
All right, Bob Buckner,
Yes.
Bob Thoma,
yes.
John Leo,
Yes.
Sue Stewart,
Yes.
Kim Morris.
Yes.
I'm not skipping you, Michael, it's just you're our alternate tonight, so we just need the 5. And that's a pass.
What would your vote have been, Michael?
I'm
I don't mean.
I'm scouring the zoning, the new, the proposed zoning code right now for the language that they use for waterfront. Because I recall that conversation very much too, Sue. But
Well, anyway, while you do
that's,
that.
Motion
It's
passes.
a motion passes. Okay,
Great.
you're on your way, Jess. Motion to adjourn? Don't need a motion.
You don't need a vote, you have the power, Bob.
Okay, I have the power. We're out of here.
Anytime, Bob says.
Bob, you can now go have a Valentine's drink.
Well, I don't, but I'll have.